Welcome to the wonderful world of Huskylock sewing. I'm Sue Hausman, and I oversee the education program for Viking Sewing Machine Company.
And I'm Amy Doggett, education consultant with Viking Sewing Machines.
And we're so pleased to be here with you today. Actually, our guide for this videotape on how to use your new Huskylock will be the Huskylock Owner's Handbook, which is available for purchase at your local Viking dealer. And you may want to buy one so that you can sew through the samples as well and then glue them in place for future reference. Well, Amy, I think we should get going. And the first thing we want to do is turn on our Huskylock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a switch on the right side of your Huskylock to turn it on and off. And that also turns on the power as well as the light. And then a few other things that I know you're going to love because, of course, the Huskylock has been designed for the home sewer. The hand wheel turns toward you, and the tension discs are all marked with numbered and color-coded tension, so that we'll be saying that the normal too is all set and marked for you, and they're lay-in tension dials. We have adjustable presser foot pressure, and that's also right on the top, and we just turn it right for tight and left for loose, and that lets us handle all different weights of fabrics. And of course a built-in light for sewing, but the best thing is the sewing and the time it's going to save you. People ask me, just what will a Huskylock do? Well, it's like a microwave is to cooking, right, Amy?
Right.
It just cuts your sewing time in half. And that is thanks to the fact, let's show them the little cutter, because basically there are two cutters, a moving cutter and a fixed cutter, and they work like a scissors, and they actually trim the edge of your fabric as you're sewing. And then there are two loopers. You'll get friendly with these as we sew today, but the upper looper and the lower looper. And they overcast the edges of the fabric as you're sewing. And then there are needles, one or two, and the needles are actually sewing the seam. So you're actually accomplishing three things at once. And those looper threads are sewing over a stitch finger. It's a little finger on the throat plate. You might want to find it on your Huskylock so you're familiar with it. And that, of course, keeps your fabric very flat as you sew. So what are we doing? We're trimming, we're overcasting, and we're sewing all in one step, 3 times as fast, and of course, twice as the speed of your sewing machine. Well, the first thing that we want to address is how to thread the Huskylock. You know, this is where some people they go, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. Trust me, you can do this, right, Amy?
Mm-hmm.
Threading a Huskylock is very easy. And I know you're going to share with them a little bit about threads.
Yes, on our Huskylock, today we're going to be using cone thread, but we don't always have to use cone thread. We are able to use regular spools of thread. There are spool caps that are included in the accessories with your Huskylock, and this fits right over top of your regular spools so that the thread rolls off the spool very smoothly and does not get caught on your spool ends. We also have thread nets that fit over very silky or very slippery spools of thread so that the thread will come off very easily and not get bunched up underneath.
And that's great. Well, I know you're threaded up in blue because we were doing a project,
Yes,
but we're going to take those off. We just cut the threads, okay, and then do we just sew out the excess, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so just sew a little bit, hold on to the tail, and this is different from your sewing machine. You don't need fabric under the foot as you're sewing. Well, today we're going to use 4 different colors of thread, and Amy, I know they're right here, and I'll just let you put them on.
Okay.
You might say, why 4 colors? Well, I mentioned earlier that the tension discs have color-coded numbers, and actually all the threading is color-coded. And so this way, if you match the color of the thread for your practice sewing to the color on the actual disc or threading guide. So for our left needle we'll use yellow because it's a yellow-orange, and for our right needle we'll use red, and for our upper looper we'll use green, and for our lower looper we will use a blue cone. And now we're ready to thread, right?
Right. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to slide our front cover. We have a little hole here to put our fingers in, and slide it to the right and pull it down.
Great.
On the inside, we have a built-in color-coded threading guide, and this is very convenient for our threading. We don't have to keep referring back to our workbook when we want to rethread.
Great.
The first thread we will start with is the green, which is the upper looper. The thread slides into the wire guide.
And I know we want to have this all the way up, right?
Right.
And the interesting thing is you slide it in from the front.
Yes.
And then it comes through the correct way.
That's correct. Snap it into the first guide.
And that's a little clip right at the top.
And lay it into the lay-in tension. I'm going to go ahead and begin threading, Sue, and if you can walk us through it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. There actually are several open guides that you go through. Of course, the little diagram shows you which one, but not only do you have the diagram, but you have little dots right next to those guides. So we simply drop it into the first guide, and then into the second, and then right down underneath at the bottom of the arm of the upper looper, and then right on the upper looper, a little wire hook that we're actually going to go into. So drop the thread in that for them. And then we're going to go through the eye of the upper looper, which is really easy to do. Okay? And the fun thing is these have really big eyes on them, which makes it easy to thread your Huskylock. So simply bring the thread through the eye, grasp it with the tweezer at the back, and pull it straight out the back of the Huskylock. And generally we advise that you bring out about 4 inches behind your Huskylock and that you have it under the foot. Great. So our upper looper's all threaded,
yes,
right?
Yes, it is.
Now that was easy.
Very easy.
What's next?
Our next thread is blue, and this is our lower looper. Slide it again into the wire guide, but this time we're coming from the back.
Okay.
Okay. Snap it into the clip and lay it into our lay-in tension.
And you simply slip it into the open guides that are marked, in this case, with little blue dots. The next part, Amy, this is the best part of this whole Huskylock. It has a self-threading lower looper, which has 2 little red arrows on it.
Right there.
Okay, now what do we do with it?
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to pull it out.
Move it to the right.
To the right, all the way out till it clicks. I'm going to take my thread, and there's another pigtail guide right here.
Right there.
And instead of laying the thread immediately into our hook on our lower looper, I'm going to go ahead and thread the eye of the lower looper.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're going to pull it out the back.
Pull it out the back.
All right.
And with my tweezers, I'm going to take my thread and put it into that hook. And with my finger, I'm going to push my arrow back into the Huskylock so that it not only clicks, but the arrows are matched up as well.
So it clicks over and the arrows match up, and now our lower looper is threaded. Man,
correct.
this is simple because now all we have left are the needles.
Right.
Great.
The first needle that we're going to thread is red, and this is the right needle. Okay. And just like our green thread, we're going to lay it in between the wires and bring it around front. Snap it into the clip, lay it into the lay-in tension, and then simply follow the arrows in the direction located on the front of our Huskylock.
And then, of course, the final would be to go through the needle, right?
Right, exactly.
There's a little guide right above the needle, right?
Right.
All right. One more.
One more and we're all finished. Our yellow thread is our left needle. Again, into the wire guide at the top, from the back.
Right.
Snap it into the clip, into the lay-in tension, and again we're going to follow the arrows into the wire guide immediately above the needles and thread our needle.
These really are easy to thread.
They really are.
And again, you could grasp it with the tweezers, which is sometimes the easiest way to get those threads and pull them to the back. Okay, now once we're threaded, there are a couple of things we want to check. The first, make sure that all those threads are under the foot and toward the back, and that you have that 4-inch tail. And then another thing is that each one is seated into the tension disc. In those lay-in tensions, there's actually 2 discs that will close down on the thread. So raise the presser foot and give a little tug on the threads. Those tension discs will open when you raise the presser foot, and that will actually lay them down in there well. And I always suggest if you're having a real loopy thread when you're sewing, check to be sure that that thread is in the tension discs and seated in there, because that's really important. And then one more thing before we ever begin to sew is to be sure that you close that front cover and you just bring it forward and it'll actually snap right into place. Well, I would say we're ready to test stitch.
think so.
And how do we go about that, Amy?
We're going to make sure that our threads are all in the back, and again, we've pulled on them a little bit to make sure that they're in the tension disc. I'm going to place my presser foot down.
Now we should mention one of the nice features of this Huskylock is that presser foot lift on the right side. Go ahead and lift that up. There's where our tension disc opened, and there's where they closed. And so, of course, that raises and lowers the presser foot. And it's so convenient over there because you have your hands free. You don't have to be reaching around behind the machine to do that. It's great. Okay, test sewing.
All right. All I have to do when I begin sewing
Would
is
you
to
run a
place...
chain first, you think?
Oh, sure.
I think
Yeah.
usually we would run a chain.
Most of the time, yes. And we like to have at least a 4-inch chain when we begin sewing.
So we can actually see here that chains of threads are forming now as we sew. One thing we haven't really talked about is that our tension settings are all on normal. And once we've tested really to see that the chain is forming, would we put a piece of fabric underneath?
Right.
One of the things you're going to love. Now, how do you do that, Amy? Do we need to raise the foot?
We don't need to raise the foot. Our feed teeth will automatically grab a hold of the fabric and pull it underneath the presser foot. So we just need to place our fabric at the very front of our presser foot and begin serging.
Okay. And I always say if you have a real thick fabric, you might want to lift up the toe of the foot. And of course, some people like to raise the foot, but here's important. Chain off at the end, right? Again, that 4-inch chain, and then cut it with a scissors. Well, this is great. Here's our standard we've already sewn the first exercise of the book, the 4-thread stitch, which we use for seaming. Great. Another thing that I think is important to mention is that our tensions we can see are basically good here. Our needle, which is red, is laying in as our reinforcing stitch, and our needle, which is yellow, is actually our seam. Sometimes when you see that seam too much, when you open the fabric, if you tighten the needle tension just a little bit, our upper looper thread, which is green, is laying all on the top, and our lower looper thread is laying all on the bottom, that blue one. So our tension is perfect. The thing people are going to love about this Huskylock, if we take a look at those tension discs again, they will see that they all have numbers, and that the numbers between 3 and 5 are marked for normal. And what happens then is that if you have them set right on that 4, 4, 4, 4, very little adjustment is needed. Okay, Amy, I think we're ready to start sewing our way through the handbook, and I'll use that as my guide. I know the first thing we actually sew is a 4-thread overlock stitch, which you actually already did for us.
Right.
I'd like to talk a little bit about what we would use that for. When we sew a garment and we want to sew the seams and overcast them all at one time, here would be just what you did. It sewed, it trimmed, and it seamed, and the inside of the garment would look like this, and the right side of the garment would then look like this. And so that would be a very, very nice finish for lighter weight fabrics, for knits, for children's wear, things like that. But there are times that we still want to press a seam open. And I know many of the folks are at this kind of an option where their seams are all sewn on their regular sewing machine. And I sewed this on my Viking, of course, and there would be our fray seams. So in this case, we would actually finish the seams first and then sew our seam and press it open. And so that gives us a wonderful finish. Anything with a hang, this would be the best option. Don't you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. So we've already sewn that 4-thread. We had our length and our width set on normal, but I think it's important to talk about where the length and width are located. Shall we address sewing with a different stitch length first?
We sure will. First thing we're going to do, Sue, is to swing open our side cover. And this reveals our differential feed that I know that we're going to talk about later, and our stitch length, which is located right here. The numbers are from 4 to R, 4 being the longest length and R being the shortest length.
R for
rolled edge.
Right.
Okay. I'll open up.
Sure, just release that
Release
lever.
the lever, that's correct. It moves up to 4 and down to R very easily. 2.5 to 3 is usually the normal thread length.
Why don't we sew a little bit at 4 and a little bit at 2? Let's leave it at 4, and so you set it and then you clip it back.
And clip it back. And of course we do close the side cover because we don't want to get it right. The thread and our fingers need to be out of that cover.
Right, there you go.
All right.
So always close the cover before sewing, but it's a good idea to get your thread chain out of it. while you're
Right,
closing it.
right. Okay, I'm going to just sew 1/3 of the way down my fabric. So you can see the long stitch length. And of course I stop with my needles in the fabric so that the fabric doesn't shift, just like on our sewing machines. Swing open the side cover, release the lever, and move my arm down to about 2. Close, stitch a little bit more. Again, my needles are in my fabric. And finally, move the arm to R.
So all the way to this end, and I see that tail there
Right.
got in there. So get it. Good.
Okay, and close. And of course, we need to remember to put our lever back up so to secure the arm. And finally, sew right off of our fabric.
This is too short a length. We would really never sew that short a length on
right.
something like that, would we?
No.
But you can see the long length, the medium normal length, and the real short length. So that's adjusting stitch length, which is easy. What about adjusting stitch width?
Well, so that's very easy also. Our stitch width dial is located right here at the base of our throat plate. The ranges of our stitch width are from R for rolled edge to 6 millimeters wide. When I want to change my stitch width, I raise my presser foot. To increase my stitch width, I turn the dial away from me. To decrease, rotate the dial towards me. What the stitch width is actually doing is moving the cutter. So we do have a bit of a difference in the width.
That's great. And what would it be set on for normal sewing?
Normal sewing is 5.
Great. Okay. Then I think we're ready to start talking about how to secure ends as you're sewing.
Right.
What you want to do, sometimes you want the beginning and the end to be locked and not pull out. We're going to show you a real easy way, right?
Right, exactly. I'm going to make sure that my stitch length is back to about 2.5 to 3, which is the normal as we discussed before, and move my thread out of the way.
And then we'll just simply take our fabric and pretend we're starting a seam. And to start sewing, sew right onto the fabric just a few stitches. And this would be whether you're trimming or not. And then raise the presser foot and bring the tail of thread around under the foot and in front of the cutter. And what will happen now, you'll be sewing and then put the presser foot down and keep sewing. And you'll actually be sewing over the tail of thread and catching it in the stitching. And then when you get to the other end, sew 1 stitch off the fabric. This is to lock the other end. And again, raise the presser foot. And what that will do, and I see you're just taking sort of a hand stitch with the hand wheel so that you can go a little more accurately 1 stitch off. That's good. There's times you want that.
I'm also making sure that my needles are in the highest position as well.
Ah, okay. Raise the presser foot. Pull on the fabric just to clear the chain off the stitch finger. Swing the fabric again forward and start sewing about a 1/2 inch from the end and stitch back over what you've already been sewing. And this is great because what happens is it actually locks both ends. Can we hold that up and let everybody see that? And this would be something we could trim real closely if we wanted to, or it would be locked in. There aren't a whole lot of times that you want to tie off like this, but if you're going to find that you're sewing where you need it so that it won't pull out at one end or the other, this is the way you would tie off with your serger. Okay, so let's move on then in our handbook. And the next technique we'd like to sew is outside corners. And I know sometimes we use this on napkins, or a lot of times I cut round corners because it's, faster. But there are times you want to go around a square corner, and you can help us with that, right, Amy?
Right. We're going to begin just like we have any other time, except now we are going to have the edge of our fabric right along the edge of our cutter. So we're barely going to cut anything off, if any.
Just sort of trimming around the edge.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going to serge down the side of my fabric, trimming just a little bit, as we had talked about before. And as I get down to the end, I'm going to hand crank a couple stitches so that I'm just 1 stitch off of the end of the fabric. Make sure that my needles are all the way up in the up position. Lift up my presser foot, pull on my fabric so that the stitches come off of the stitch finger. Bring my fabric back around to the beginning so that the edge of the fabric is just in front of the needles. Lower my presser foot. And because there's a little bit of slack there, Sue, what I'm going to do is pull up on the top threads to get rid of that. And then begin serging. Again, not trimming anything or very little, and right off the fabric.
Great. And I know there are a number of times that we would want to do this. We did do one earlier so we could get it right up and show you all the fact that we have actually stitched right around that corner and covered those stitches. Super! Now what about inside corners?
Inside corners are as easy as outside corners. And I have a little trick that I came up with.
Oh good, show us your tricks. Oh, good.
I have a little term to use. We're going to begin just as we did with the outside corner and serge, not trimming any fabric off of the inside of our fabric. Okay, I'm going to stop so that the cutter is about a ½ inch away from the inside corner. Alrighty? Make sure that my needles are in. And I'm going to bring my fabric around and make what I call a shark's tail, because our Huskylock very much likes to sew in straight lines rather than in curves. So I'm going to make a shark's tail so that line is now a straight line. And I will serge right up along.
Great. Yeah. This is something we'd probably use for pocket edges and slits, things like that. There are many times, that's excellent, many times that we would want to go around an inside corner, and even though you can see where we folded it, it actually goes back to that inside corner shape.
Yes, it does.
I've actually done plackets and blouses this way too.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
So lots of techniques you can do. Well, we're getting there in our workbook, aren't we? The casing and hem fold is one of my favorites. You know, many times when you're doing kids' PJs or elastic waists for yourself, you may want to put elastic in a waistband with and it looks like you have added a separate piece. Can you show us how to do that real quickly?
I sure can.
Because this is so easy and so fast. Everybody's gonna love it.
It is really nice. This is how we do our casing hem fold. I'm going to fold my fabric up just as I would a regular hem. Okay, and then I'm going to fold it back on itself so that we have a lip of fabric, I call it, sticking off the edge. And this is very easy. Now you're going to notice that this is very bulky fabric, and because this is bulky fabric, I'm going to lift up my presser foot a bit.
Right.
Okay, and slide my fabric underneath so that it will start smoothly.
Okay.
Okay, and just begin sewing.
So actually we're sewing almost as if we were doing a blind hem on our Viking. But in this case, we're on a blind hem, we just barely catch the edge. In this case, you're catching the edge really well, aren't you?
Right, and I'm not cutting the fold of the fabric.
Okay, so from the wrong side, it looks like a casing that we could put elastic in, right? But what I love is, wait till you see it from the right side. Look at that. It's actually like a waistband fold that we could actually stick elastic right in there with a bodkin or a safety pin. And I've also seen this as a hem. If I turn it over, maybe they can get the feel for it, at the bottom of a t-shirt or the bottom of a cuff. So it works both ways. It's a wonderful technique, and what a time saver. These are the kinds of things that they use a lot in ready-made, and so these are some of the things we want to share with you. Ribbing is another technique. I've got a little child's little dress here that's one of our fun projects that we've been known to do, and we've put all the ribbing. This is a fast project, sewing that ribbing on with our Huskylock, and you're going to show us how, right?
Yes, I will, and it's very easy. I've cut a neckline out of my fabric already, and I'm using regular ribbing. I'm going to fold my ribbing in half and match up the ends of the neckline and the ribbing. I'm just going to serge a seam, and I am not going to cut off very much. I'm going to trim just a little because this is such a small neck band. I'm going to take a couple stitches into the fabric with my needles down so that it secures the ribbing to the fabric, and I'll stretch the ribbing to fit the neckline.
So we'd be actually stretching the ribbing and sewing with the ribbing on the top, right?
Right, exactly.
And I know you would usually have a pattern or a ratio for this ribbing, but man, is this a professional finish for necklines and cuffs, and fast compared to doing this with just a straight stitch or a zigzag. And of course it has the elasticity too, that if you wear this and stretch it, great. So use this 3/4 thread serge. This is one of the things that I think we need to clarify what we use what stitches for. Here you've seen us use it to overcast, to sew seams, to sew ribbing, for many different applications. And so for that reason we have lots more things that we're going to share with you. One of the best is differential feed. Now I always like to give you a little display of sort of what differential feed means. Underneath the presser foot, there actually are feed teeth, just like on a sewing machine, the feed teeth that feed the fabric along. And on most sergers, there's two, and they can only move together at the same pace, like this. But when you have differential feed, the feed teeth in the front can move faster, and that would mean you'd have it moving up to twice as fast when you set differential feed on two, or it can move slower, and that would be moving that differential feed toward 0.7, and it sort of holds the fabric taut. Now I've sort of explained it. We're going to actually do it because I think you'll understand it better. And Amy brought this wonderful knit dress that she had done of a wool knit, and she said if it weren't for differential feed, I would have had a real problem with stretching out seams and things and putting the ribbing on and all. And I know on my vest, going around these curves, I use differential feed too. So let's do a differential feed sample for them and actually show them how we adjust differential feed.
Okay, great. The first fabric we're going to use is silky fabric. If anyone here likes to serge with linings or make a clothes, scarf, something very lightweight, differential feed is a very, very good feature. I have the silky lining fabric, and at normal, as Sue had stated,
let's show first where differential
sure,
feed is.
I think that would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Our differential feed is located on the side of the side cover at the very front, and it too unlocks just like our stitch length did, and it moves up and down. Very easy, and it locks again.
So you're going to put that point back to 1.0, which
Yeah.
means those two sets of feed teeth are moving together. Okay,
Right.
so first we're going to sew it like if we didn't have differential feed. All right, on this silky fabric, and we may get some puckers, is that right?
Right, we
Yeah.
are expecting to get puckers.
And that's the problem. Sometimes on a very lightweight fabric, you may see some puckering occur, whether it's 4-thread overlock or 3-thread, and there we do. We definitely see some puckering on that. So now how do we prevent this?
Preventing our puckers, we simply open up our side cover and unlock the lever for our differential feed, and we'll place our differential feed at 0.7. We'll move it up and lock it again so that it doesn't move on us.
And that's like holding things taut as we sew them.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And I'll show you on the very opposite side what a difference this is going to make.
You know, one thing too I always like to point out is that basically you don't have to set it right at 0.7 either. It could be between 1 and 0.7. But there you do see, we've got them kind of far apart, but you do see kind of a major difference between the side sewn without differential feed and with our differential feed set at 0.7. That's great. So we wouldn't have puckery scarves or seams on silkies and things.
Exactly.
Well, what do we use the 2.0 for?
The 2.0, we're going to turn our differential feed back to 1.0 so that I can show you this next demonstration.
So you went back to normal.
Exactly, and this is the technique that I used on my sweater dress that you just showed. I'm using a very stretchy sweater knit, and if anybody knits their own garments, they will certainly love this feature. At normal, our fabric is going to ripple.
So in other words, if something is too stretchy, it actually will kind of stretch it out as we sew.
And it's
I
very
see
obvious.
that.
Now at 2.0, what this is going to do is as you were explaining earlier, our front feed teeth are going to move faster than our back feed teeth and force the fabric into the back feed teeth.
Gotta get that little tail.
Oh, did it get back in there?
I'm not sure we don't have that kind of great.
Okay. And I'm going to lift my presser foot up because this is a bit bulky fabric.
Wow, what a difference! Sure, so anyone that sews with knits would really, really utilize this feature. You can see the difference when we've sewn with the differential feed engaged at 2. And here again, it wouldn't have to go all the way to 2.
No.
It could be set somewhere in between. Well, now I know there's something else we use that 2.0 for, right?
Yes, we do.
Gathering?
Oh, this is a wonderful feature.
Tell everyone what a time saver this is.
This will save if anyone likes to do make garments with lots of ruffles or curtains, home deck projects. This is going to be a big time saver. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my differential feed at 2.0. Okay, if everyone can see that.
What about length?
Okay, and stitch length is going to be increased to 4, which is the highest, the
The
longest,
longest stitch length. Okay, there we go. We'll work together on this.
Oh, okay, that sounds
All
great,
right.
Sue. Thanks. Now, I always like to increase my needle tensions because this will give us even more gathers.
So So actually, if your fabric's heavier, this really works only on light to medium weight, like calico weights and things.
Exactly. And all I have to do is simply begin to serge. And I'm going to hold my finger behind.
I'll do that. So
okay, that sounds great.
You sort of hold it back. We probably have too many gathers almost. So we could actually reduce our tension.
Exactly.
But keep sewing and we'll show.
Okay, I need to turn my needle tensions back to normal so that they don't break. Because I've got high tension.
Now, I always suggest to people, try the gathering just with differential feet set at 2 and length at 4. And many times it's enough. And then increase your needle tensions as you need to, because this is really, really tight gathers. But what I like is you can adjust these gathers. And sometimes I'll put a different color thread on the needle, as we've done here, and you can adjust it on the needle tension. What a time saver. This is great. Well, we've really told them about differential feed. I suppose we should go back to normal again. What do you think?
That sounds really good.
So we're going to set our differential feed back to the normal setting of 1.0, knowing that anytime we needed those types of helps with specialty fabrics, we would just adjust it. And our tensions are back to normal, are they, for regular?
We need to put our stitch length back.
Stitch length back, okay. I know we've been sewing up until now really with 4 threads, 2 needles, and an upper looper and a lower looper. But we can also sew with 3 threads, is that right?
That is right.
Yes, and so how do we do that?
Well, we do have an Allen wrench in our accessory case, and I'm going to make sure that my needles are all the way up in the up position. And how we remove a needle is simply by placing the Allen wrench in the screw above the needles, okay, dropping out one of the needles.
So just take out, to sew with only 1 needle, you just take one out, right? And I think the thing that I want to point out to everyone is that if you want to do a wide stitch, you leave the left needle in, and if you want to do a narrow, which is what we're going to do, you leave the right needle in. And you've done my favorite thing there, Amy. You were going to do a wide. I was going to tell you to do a narrow. Well, I thought it'd be easier because we're going to go on to right edge and things. But you've done my favorite trick, which is to leave them threaded as you remove them, because then if you drop them, you have a thread to kind of fish them out with.
Right.
So once you get it out, then you can take it out. So you've removed it. Oh, and I see that you're putting that extra needle, aren't you, right here into the spool that you're not using, so you remember it. Great. Then you know where it is. So we're going to be sewing now with simply the right needle and both of our loopers, and what will that give us? Why don't you run a little sample, or maybe I'll just show the little sample of our slip, because this is a technique that's really nifty for the actual use of real lightweight fabrics. And here's a seam on a lightweight fabric done with that narrower 3-thread seam. And the 3-thread seam has a lot of elasticity to it as well. A lot of times on swimwear you can use either the wide or the narrow. And I like it for finishing too. So even in my little French heirloom things. Yeah. So 3-thread sewing is very easy, and one of the major things that we use 3-thread sewing for actually is for rolled edge. Exactly. Isn't that true? That's right. Rolled edge, I'll tell you, what a time saver on your Huskylock. If you want to put a finish at the edge of a little cuff, as on this pink blouse, or around the edge of a pretty collar, you don't even have to bother with a hem. You can simply sew the rolled edge. And I know for a fact that rolled edge is really simple on this Huskylock. You don't have to fiddle around, do you? What do you do?
All I have to do is open up my front cover, and this is a new thing that we're going to show. Actually, I need to open up my side cover as well. This is removing our stitch finger, and it's very easy on our Huskylock 700.
Many sergers you have to change the plate and change the foot, and we don't have to do that. We just take the wide stitch finger out, and that exposes a little tiny narrow stitch finger for rolled edge, which is on the plate.
Exactly.
Right.
There's a lever here at the front of our Huskylock, and all I need to do, and there's also there's a couple arrows that you can see. I'm sure they are colored. I'll grab a hold of this, which is the stitch finger, with my thumb and forefinger.
It's a little handle for you.
It is. Depress the lever and pull out my stitch finger.
You know, show that to everyone, because I think it's really important that they see what a stitch finger is.
Yeah.
And actually, this is what we've been forming stitches over for the wider stitches. And now we're actually going to take it right away from the throat plate, and we have a little tiny one there to make little tiny stitches. little narrow stitches. That's great. So is there a place to put this? Because I
There-
can see me losing this. I know there is, right?
There is a place to put our
You
stitch
got it.
finger. It is inside of our front cover.
Great.
And our stitch finger lays right into that
Right.
holder
That is
face
super.
down. Yeah, so that when we close it, we don't lose it.
Same foot. We just leave the standard foot on. Now, what other adjustments do we make?
Exactly. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to adjust our right needle tension, which is the thread that we're using, to about 3. Okay, and our upper looper tension is 7. And our lower looper tension is 8.
About 8. I know that this can vary depending on the thread and the type of fabric, but the reason the lower looper is the highest is it's going to pull the threads around so that all we're really going to see is the upper looper.
Right.
Yeah,
There's only 2 more things that we need to do, and that is set our stitch width to R. We finally get to move our stitch width.
R for rolled
Okay.
edge.
Right. And our stitch length to R, which is way at the bottom of the bar. There we
Great.
go.
Great. Sometimes when I'm just starting out, go ahead and do it, but I sometimes try it with a little longer stitch length and then shorten it up as short as I want to go.
Okay.
But it's up to you. I mean, just for experimenting, I
Right.
think it's easier to get started with a longer stitch length. Then you can tighten it way up. However, sometimes I like that picot look.
Yeah. I'm going to sort of chain to make sure that my threads are coming out correctly.
Okay.
And I simply serge right along the edge of my fabric.
Isn't that great? You know, I've seen this on napkin edges and edges of ruffles. It can, when you do home deck work, it can be a tremendous time saver. Okay, and so there we see that green thread wrapping around the edge. Now, I know a lot of times this is where a specialty thread, such as a woolly nylon, would be used, which wraps around and covers much thicker. Or my favorite is to use one of the silky type rayon, the sulky threads, because they cover so beautifully. So lots of options. I have a couple other rolled edge samples that I would really love to share with everybody. One is our little ruffles here on this little guy, but also the pillow with the tassels. You want to tell them about the little tassels?
This is a Huskylock tassel, and this was done a rolled edge around buttonhole twist to give it a bit of a filler. And there's also a rolled edge around the edge of the front cover, and I've also finished the back of the envelope, back of the pillow with the rolled edge.
So a lot of places that we would take time to turn under, blind hem, whatever. I love this though. You actually wrap it around cardboard like we used to make yarn tassels.
Exactly.
And it's just a string of rolled edge that you sewed. It's amazing. And then the basket weave pillow, this is just a fun one, isn't it? And this was variegated thread, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
The sulky variegated, where all these little strips were finished with rolled edge.
That's right.
And then woven to create this really nifty. This would be cute as a yoke too.
Oh, definitely.
Well, there's another technique with rolled edge, right?
Yes,
Called
there is.
lettucing
Lettucing, that's
or
correct.
ruffled
ruffle.
rolled edge. How do we do that?
It's very easy. We have our ribbing, and we can use our sample that we have from before.
Okay.
Okay. And all we have to do is lengthen our stitch length a bit.
Okay, so this is done with a little longer stitch length usually.
And it's about 3. So we want what we call a picot looking edge. And this time we're going to move also our differential feed, okay, to 0.7. We want our fabric to be stretched out to give it a ruffled look.
Right, so the stitch will stretch the fabric.
Exactly. I'm not going to cut the edge of the fabric because we don't want to ruin our neckline.
Okay,
So-
but even if you did, actually you're finishing it, so it's not life or death, so people shouldn't be
Right.
afraid of it, right?
Right, exactly. And we're using also the differential feed to be able to stretch the fabric, and we can stretch a little bit more if we want it as well.
Sure, because we've got that differential feed set at 0.7, it actually stretches out the ribbing as it goes through, and that's what creates this little ruffled effect. Now I have a really good example of that here on our little dress, where you see that this was an interlock fabric that actually had a lot more stretch than your ribbing, which is interesting. That ribbing didn't have a lot of stretch to it. So as it went through, it was stretched out, and then it came back with a little ruffled effect. So it can be a fun technique to use on a lot of different things. Well, we've done a lot of rolled edge things that were pretty functional. I know, Amy, we're not going to take time to sew pin tucks, but you made this wonderful heirloom serged nightgown, and if we could get a look at these pin tucks, these were done with the sulky thread.
Right.
And they were just rows of rolled edge, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And don't they look wonderful with a little bit of Swiss insertion and some of the ladder stitch that we'll talk about later? It's just great. So some nice things. Well, the next thing we're going to do is really one of my favorites. I'll tell you, the Huskylock actually will create a finished braid look for you, right, Amy? You don't even have to purchase trims. The vest that I'm wearing, and this has a finish all the way around. It's just a tapestry fabric, and it's finished with a yarn type thread that is serged right on that raw edge. I actually did serge it over the salvie so that it would trap the edge really well. And you can see that it has the look of a braid having been put on the edge of the vest. And so we have lots of other samples that we're going to share, but let's talk a little bit about working with decorative. I know we have several different ones here, don't we, Amy? Mm-hmm. Decorative threads. I actually threw this pearl cotton in because I wanted to say you can even use some of this type of thickness. The great thing about a Huskylock is that the eyes of the loopers are bigger than the eyes on needles. So you can stick this thick thread through those loopers and then they will cover the edges of your fabric. The thing, if you use a spool like this, you're going to have it all wound off and have it running freely. And in the old days, we were so limited. But today, there's so many great new pretty threads, the slivers and the glamours and the ribbon flosses that actually work right off a spool that we don't have to worry about the old pearl cottons. What thread are you going to use today?
I think we're going to use the buttonhole twist.
Now, am I right? We have to get set back from rolled edge, right?
Exactly.
Maybe you need to show us how to do that. And we probably want this to be wide.
Yes. So what I need to do is I'm going to take my right needle and place it in the left needle, still keeping the thread through it so that if I do drop it, I am able to get a hold of it again.
Okay. Now we're going to use decorative thread probably just in the upper looper for our demonstration. I did use it in both loopers for my vest. What do we use in the needle?
Okay, in the needle I'm just going to be using regular thread.
Okay, so generally it would be regular thread that matched the project.
Exactly.
All right, so you're going to thread up now the left needle with that yellow thread.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to thread your upper looper with a pretty thread?
Yes, I am. I'm going to leave the needle thread loose because there is a threading sequence that we need to stick to.
Okay.
Okay.
But now what about that little finger? Do we put that back?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so that's just removed for rolled edge.
Right.
All right. Okay, show us how to do that.
It's very easy. There are arrows on our stitch finger, and there is a larger arrow where they need to be matched up. I'm going to slide my finger up next to my other stitch fingers, line up the arrows, and snap that in.
Wow, that was simple. And your presser foot was up. That probably
Presser
made it
foot,
easier.
it did. It made it a lot easier.
Okay.
So I'm going to be replacing my green thread with my buttonhole twist.
Okay. So this is a thick, shiny, silky thread.
Yes, it is.
But we could be using woolly, or we could be using pearl cotton.
Exactly.
Or glamour, or Madeira. Now, I know while you're threading, maybe I'll give just a few little thoughts on using different threads. I've used lots of different ones, and when you use different threads, you do need to adjust the tension. And a general rule for that is the thicker the thread, the lower the tension. And I explain that by saying that, of course, this thread is between those two discs we talked about. And if the thread's pinched too tightly between those discs, and if it's real thick, it's going to get pinched in there and get caught. So the thicker the thread, the lower the tension, which means those discs will open up a little bit further as you lower the tension, so that thread will slide through easily. And in addition to that, some of the threads slide through fast, so then you might tighten it up a little bit, but that usually will help you. My suggestion is if you're using, for example, a sulky rayon or a buttonhole twist, which is almost the weight of regular thread, then leave your tension set at normal and see how your stitch looks, and reduce your tension slowly, one number at a time, until your stitch is balanced. And what we want to see, and what we're going to see when Amy has us all threaded up and runs us a sample, is that our beautiful top stitching thread is going to be on the top of the fabric because it's on the upper looper. So that's the goal that we have in putting the different threads into our Huskylock. And remember too that you can do decorative threads also on the lower looper because it has a big eye too. But if you don't really care what the wrong side looks like, go ahead and use regular thread on the lower looper and don't waste the decorative threads because this does take a lot of threads sometimes. Okay, so Amy's just about ready for us, and you're probably going to do this on some quilted fabric for us.
That's correct.
Any other adjustments we need to, well, let's just check everything.
Okay.
The first thing, and I always like to go to my handbook, and that's a good reminder for everyone. With each technique, it tells you what fabric, quilted fabric, it tells you what thread. It says the stitch length is 3 to 4.
3 to 4, so we're going to open up the side cover. And it is on 3, but I think I'm going to increase it maybe 3.5.
With the thicker threads, that would usually be a good idea. And then stitch width 5 to 6. Let's make it wide for pretty stitching.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea.
I usually use the widest when I'm doing this type of decorative stitching. And differential feed we'll leave at 1, I think. But basically, you know, we might change differential feed if we were having a stretching out or a puckering. So that could be adjustable. Our stitch finger is in. And our left needle is at 4 tension. All right, and our lower looper is at 4. Now what is our upper looper on?
Okay. Our upper looper is going to be about, it's going to be looser than our other threads.
As we talked about. So the two with normal thread are at normal, and the heavier thread is reduced slightly. Good, good. Okay, and then we simply serge.
That's right.
And this could be used on placemats, it could be used on garments. Well, that's a good idea. You always chain first to be sure that it is stitching before you start on your fabric. One thing I always suggest, practice on some scraps first. Yeah, like if we were going to do a quilted placemat from this pink quilted fabric, I would take some scraps first and just run it and be sure that it looked good and adjust it.
I'll begin by placing my fabric right under the front of my presser thread and serge.
And of course, this is pretty stretched out. If we wanted this closer together and really tight stitch, we would just shorten the stitch length. Is that right?
That's right.
But you can see, all of you at home, how easily we were able to put this decorative thick thread right onto our Huskylock in the eye of that upper looper. It threads very easily. And I know, do you want to show them those little Butler floss threaders and just lay one here maybe on the edge of the machine, because sometimes people ask, how do you thread that thick stuff through? Sometimes you can just tie it on and pull it through. But the other thing would be to use one of these little floss threaders, and you stick this end through the looper and you put the thread through the little loop at the end, like so, and then when you pull it through, it actually yanks that thread right through the looper. And I think people can picture that, that it makes it much easier to thread them. So that's just our hint for the day, right?
Right.
So decorative serging, just a few more samples of some pretty decorative serging here. Another vest, this one done too with one of the woollier type yarns with a southwestern theme. And you can see in this case the pinky colored thread on the upper looper and a blue thread or teal thread on the lower looper. So you can actually do 2-color finishing on things that are reversible. I love this for reversible things. It's just great. And here we have the little conches and things. This is our little tidy towel, one of our Viking projects from our Artist Sewing television series. And you see here the ruffle along the bottom put with flat lock done with decorative threads. So decorative threads have lots and lots of different functions. It's just amazing to think that we can finish the edge of something just running around it. This little collar for a little girl's sweatshirt, we call it a sweatshirt scarf, and the raw edge just finished with, in this case, the ribbon floss in our upper looper and right around the bow. So that's one of the things I've greatly enjoyed about my Huskylock, the fact that I can finish the edges of things so quickly and so easily. Well, we've done decorative, we've done lots and lots of things, but I know you've got something on your dress that you're going to share that has to do with 2-thread sewing, and this is one of the other options. We said you could do 4-thread sewing, we said you could do 3-thread sewing. Now you can also do two-thread sewing on your Huskylock, and it's easy, isn't it?
It's very easy.
Let's show them the two-thread overcast first, because you know this might be used on a lightweight fabric, or if you want to save thread, you would of course just use 2 spools, and all we use then is a needle. In this case we use the left needle for wide, and the lower looper.
That's right.
I sort of remember LL, left needle, lower looper. So what do we do next?
Okay, I'm going to clip my upper looper thread, raise my presser foot, and pull out that excess. Make sure, of course, that my needle is all the way up. Okay.
And that raising that presser foot allows you to pull that out like that, didn't it?
Right, exactly.
So now you just have 2 threads on there.
That's right. But we're going to be doing something different, Sue. On our upper looper, if
I can see it.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. On our upper looper is what we call a converter lever, and it is able to be down. You just press that lever down, or up. Okay. Up we use in the 4-thread and the 3-thread techniques. Now, because we're using 2 threads, we are going to snap that down so that our upper looper is pretending that it has thread in it.
When you put that down, a little wire actually goes into the hole, the eye of the upper looper, and it thinks it has thread, and so now it will sew with just 2 threads.
That's right.
Great, so we've done that.
Okay.
And then what do we do to do 2 threads sewn?
Okay, our 2 thread, we're going to return our stitch length to 3 to the normal.
All right.
Okay, our stitch width is going to be 5, so we're going to turn that back to 5. Close our side.
Okay.
Get our thread out of the side case. Now our left needle we're going to place at 1 to 2.
So our tensions would change dramatically, but this is all in the handbook, right?
Exactly. And our lower looper anywhere from 5 to 6.
Okay.
Okay.
And of course we're going to close those doors before we sew, right?
Right. And I'll serge a little chain, of course, with my presser foot down.
And can you see that? It is, and every time we get a little different looking chain. This is our 2-thread chain. Great.
And like you were saying before, 2-thread technique is wonderful for lightweight, finishing off the edges of lightweight fabrics. And this is our 2-thread edge finish.
So this, we'd only have to have 2 combs on the machine. Yep. And there's our needle thread on this side laying like V's. That's how you know that you have your tension correct. Your needle thread actually lays like a V on the wrong side. And then we see over here our serger overcast finish. So if you wanted to finish an edge, for example, to hem a skirt and not have a real heavy finish on there, this would be the perfect way to do it. And it would again require you to only have 2 spools of thread. But I know we like to use this for other things, right?
Of course.
What did you use it for? Maybe we can get I hope we can get a shot of your cute shoulders there.
Okay. On the front of my dress, I had serged a seam for the yoke, but then after that, I took what we call a decor 6, or a very shiny thread, heavy thread in the lower looper, and in the needle, I used a regular matching thread and did a short flat lock right here.
That looks great. So, in other words, you're going to basically show us now how to do a flat lock with the 2-thread. And how do we do that?
Okay, we are still using the 2-thread technique, except this time we are going to be using a fold instead of a flat edge.
We're going to sew along a fold.
Without cutting the fold. I'll place my fold underneath my presser foot. We want the loops of our threads to loop off considerably of our fabric. So I'll serge right along the edge of the fabric. And as you can see, they are looping off quite a bit.
I see. So we've got our finished stitch looks really similar to what you just did with the V's on one side and the over edge on this side, but we do have a lot of looping off the edge there, and that's what allows us to open this up then and pull it flat, right?
Right.
This is wonderful as a decorative technique. We can actually pull that seam out to a flat, pretty seam. We could shorten up our stitch length. we could put decorative thread in the lower looper as you did. I assume that required a little tension adjustment.
A little.
And the same rule, that the heavier the thread, the less tension.
Right.
Okay, and I've got a couple of pretty examples of that too, where we've done some color blocking on this child's shirt with one of the really pretty candlelight threads, and that was done with the flat lock 2-thread actually sewing it, and then another little child's kind of waffle look here on the front of a little garment. So lots of possibilities with decorative threads and some of the creative techniques such as flat lock. The other thing, if I can get inside this one that I want to show, because there's another whole aspect to this technique, and that is whatever thread you have in the needle creates a ladder stitch on the wrong side. And this in itself can be another creative look. You used this on that heirloom sewing you did, didn't you, for your insertions and things. So the creative options are really just unlimited. Well, I know we've shown many of the basics and a number of the decorative things. And by the way, I should mention too that with our 2-thread, we can also do rolled edge. If you wanted a really light rolled edge on a scarf, really fine rolled edge on a napkin, you could do 2-thread rolled edge instead of 3. But I'm going to turn on here to my favorite part of our handbook, which tells about the optional accessory feet. Your Huskylock came with the standard foot, which is LR4, and you've seen us use it for all the techniques today that we've shown you so far. But Amy has brought the accessory feet so that we can show you some of the feet that will make techniques very fast and very easy on your Huskylock. So the first foot is the piping foot, right?
Right, Sue.
And while Amy is setting her Huskylock back to regular sewing, 4-thread sewing for our piping foot, I'm going to just clean up just a little bit. I know we've really got a lot of extra threads and things, but we sure hope that you have enjoyed seeing all of these threads. Now, the last chapter of your handbook, part 4, starts with the piping foot. That's the first one that we're going to sew with today, and I would like to show you the piping foot. It has LP on it, P for piping, of course, and you'll see that basically on the top it looks like any other accessory foot, but the important thing is the underside of feet. And you'll see that there's a great big groove under there, and that's what the piping lays into. And the great thing is it steers it and everything, so it sews piping perfectly. So I think it's important, Amy, that we tell everyone how we snap the feet off and on, right? So that'll be the first step. You know, if you would raise the presser foot, I'll just show them that there's a little black button at the back of the foot here. And actually, at the time that I press that little black button, the foot falls off. Now, do you want to tell them what you do next?
Yes, we turn our presser foot to 90 degrees and we lift up the extra lift on our presser foot.
Oh, I think we need to make real strong point of that the presser foot lift over on the right side of the Huskylock has extra lift to it. Do that with your hand just real quickly. Just lift that extra lift. Yep, and that foot goes up extra high. And that's great for heavy fabrics and also really facilitates changing the foot.
Exactly.
Okay, how do we get it out of there?
Okay, we've got our presser foot lifted that extra bit, and we simply slide our presser foot out the back.
Great. Now I have the piping foot here ready to go back on.
That's right. And we put our other accessory feet on just the opposite way we take them off. We slide our presser feet in through the back at 9 o'clock and then rotate it under. Lower our presser foot ankle and it simply snaps on.
It's great. There's a little bar on the foot and the ankle just drops right onto it. And I always say make sure that it's on there. You know, raise it up and be sure that it's on there before you start sewing. Good. Right. Now, how do we do the piping?
Okay, the piping is very easy. We are using regular store-bought piping. The piping is very easy. We are using regular store-bought piping.
We could make our own, I suppose.
And we can make our own. We lay the piping on the seam allowance where we want to have it. Okay, raw edges the same way, and our other piece of fabric on top.
So right sides together, sandwiching the piping between.
That's right. We're going to keep our piping out just a smidgen at the end of the fabric so that we know where to place our fabric. There's a groove in the front of our piping foot, and we lay the bulk of our piping underneath that groove, and we simply begin serging.
Well, no, I usually raise the presser foot and put it under there. You're just going to start off like that. Great, great. That is terrific. Yeah. have sometimes too, if the fabric is thick, started the piping and then sandwiched the fabric around it, which makes it a little bit easier if the fabrics are really thick. But boy, look at that and how that really just fed that right along. You were a little short on piping for the length of your fabric,
yeah.
but it sandwiched it in there great. So that would make it really easy.
Oh, perfect. Every
Perfect
single
piping.
time.
Okay, well, we have another wonderful foot to show, and that foot is the shirring foot. And this is my favorite. The broomstick skirts are so popular right now. It's a foot that looks really funny, and it has a couple of different features that I'd like to show you. This is the little bar right here that's going to snap on. I always like to point that out. That's the little bar that's going to point on. And then the fabric that would be flat when we, for example, sew a ruffle to a flat fabric, the fabric that would be flat would go into the slot on the top of the foot, right there. And the fabric that would be ruffled would lay underneath, so that they would be, and the underneath one is right side up, and this one is right side down, so they'd be right side together. And I know you can probably show them that again on when we get it snapped on. So this would snap on, and then, oh, I see you took that piping foot off already.
Exactly.
And what about that thread tail? Do we have to be careful of that?
The thread tail, just move it out of the way.
Okay.
Towards the back.
You know what? I have on occasion caught that in my presser foot.
Oh, yeah?
You've never done that, huh?
As a matter of fact, yes, I have.
Okay.
And our shrink foot is snapped on.
Okay.
Now, because we're gathering, Sue, we are going to be able to use our differential feed for this technique.
That's right. So we need to make a couple changes, don't we?
Right.
Differential feed would be what?
We're going to change our differential feed to 2.
So that it'll gather the under fabric.
Exactly. Our stitch length is going to be 4, which is the longest. And our stitch width is at normal at 5. Okay. Tensions are all normal at 4.
All right.
Alrighty? Okay. Now the longer fabric that I want to gather is going to be placed on the bottom. And I'm going to take a few stitches into that to get it started.
Okay.
Okay. Now the fabric that I want to remain flat is going to be slid into the top. My needles are down. I'm raising my presser foot to release the pressure inside the slot.
Ah.
Okay.
Okay.
Place my fabric all the way up to my needles. Lower my presser foot. And using both my left and my right hands, my left hand is guiding the bottom fabric. My left hand is guiding the top fabric.
Your right hand is guiding the top fabric, your left hand is guiding the bottom fabric.
That's right.
And you don't hold that bottom fabric back, right?
No, we don't.
Because it has to sure up as you sew.
That's correct.
This is amazing though. Boy, this makes broomstick skirts and curtains and things like that so fast. It's unbelievable. What a time saver. And it just does those ruffles so quickly that it's just great. Well, that is super. So we've shown 2 feet. Now I know the next foot we need to drop to 3-thread sewing, right?
Exactly.
And the next page in our workbook basically is the pearl and sequin foot. And this can give you some real pretty decorative things. So while you take out the right needle, I'll go ahead and tell them about the foot. Basically, this foot, and if you'll give me your pearls, I can probably show this just a little bit better. The foot itself has a little trough, we call it. And the pearls lay, or sequins, or I've also used this to serge over braid or like gimp cord when I wanted to do a heavy look finish on an edge of something, or to sew rows of gimp cord, such as with that pearl cotton that we did when we made that tassel. But you'll see then that the front of the pearls are going in the trough and the back are going under the foot. And of course, as we're serging, what's incredible is that the serging stitch is going to just jump over and catch over the overcast over the pearls, really. So you're set for 3-thread sewing now. What about differential feed and all?
Okay, we're going to turn everything back to the normal settings.
Okay.
Okay, so our differential feed will be 1.0. However, because we're using 4mm pearls, we need a 4mm stitch.
Oh, good.
Which on our Huskylock is 4, so we'll just keep it there. And a regular stitch tensions.
Okay.
And our stitch width is also going to be normal at 5.
All right.
Okay.
Now I suppose if the stitch didn't clear the pearls, if they were a little bigger, you might make it a little wider stitch width.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think I'll just go ahead and make it a little wider.
I know there's another special thing we have to do with this foot that we haven't done yet, and that is that we're not going to be cutting. Is that right?
That's correct.
And we're going to raise our cutter out of the way.
That's right.
Can you show us how we do
I
that?
sure can. When we remove the cutter, Sue, it's very easy. What I do is take my index finger on my left hand and press against the cutter screw right there, okay? And swing it up and back till it locks so that it's out of the way.
Good. So now we have to be careful to sew right along the edge.
Exactly.
We wouldn't want to move way over.
And we'll place our pearl foot on.
Okay.
Okay. Have a little thread in there, but that'll serge out when we make our chain stitch, which I'm going to do right now. When we place our pearls in the pearl and sequin foot, the pearls are placed first in the front trough. I'll slide those through there. We'll lift up our presser foot and slide the pearls through the back guide. I'll lower my presser foot and take a couple of stitches over the pearls to secure them so they don't slide over. My regular fabric is going to lay underneath the presser foot, underneath this white trough here. Okay, and I'll leave my pearls hang loose because if there's any tension on the pearls, it'll make the fabric get puckered. Okay, the edge of my fabric is going to follow the edge of my throat plate right there. Okay, and I will simply begin serging.
So we would be sewing these on an edge, and I do know if we wanted to sew them down the middle of something, then we would sew them on a fold like the flat lock technique that we showed. Isn't this great? And of course, if we had thread that matched our background fabric or the monofilament thread, that would be great. We wouldn't see this. What a nifty finish. Isn't that fun to have pearls right along the edge for skating costumes? I've seen this on bridal veils too with the little tiny seed pearls. That's where you use that adjustment for the narrower pearls and things. And you can do this so quickly, and sequins as well. Great. Well, we have one more foot to share, right? And that is our blind hem, or I often call this the multi-purpose foot. And I call it that because anytime you don't want to cut and you want to do a decorative technique that you would sew along the edge of something, for example, flat lock before when we did it along the fold, if you would use this blind hem foot and adjust this guide, you can sew perfectly straight because you butt up against the guide. I use it for tucks, I use it for hems, I use it for a lot of other decorative sewing as well. And the truth is, if I want to serge around something and finish it off and not trim, sometimes I just snap this on, anytime you don't want to trim. But in this case, we are going to put our cutter back down, right? And for most sewing, we just recommend that you put it down because it's important to remember to keep it down when you're sewing. You can't sew out away from that edge. And one thing we haven't pointed out are those seam guides for them to use as a guide right in front of the cutter on the guard. There are little guides for 5/8 and 1/2 inch, so that's a help too. Okay, let's put that blind hem foot on and show everyone how we would blind hem a garment. Really, I know you've got that on your cuff, and you used this blind hem on your dress, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I was wanting to mimic ready to wear, and I felt that my blind hem looked a lot nicer than what my bottom clothes looked.
I bet it does.
So
it sure does.
Here's the blind hem on the inside.
Oh yeah, there it is on the inside.
And there is on the
It's
inside.
wonderful. Okay, show us how.
Okay,
Please.
our blind hem, we are going to change our tensions slightly. Our left needle is going to remain at 4. Now our upper looper is going to be at 9 because we want that blind hem to lay nice and flat. And then our lower looper is going to be set around 5.
So we're using 3 thread, left needle only. And I think our stitch length we want fairly long, 3 to 4.
That's right.
I usually use a 4 unless it's kind of gathering up. And normal stitch width.
That's correct.
And normal length when we're ready to go.
Okay, and as you already know how to make a hem, I would fold up my hem as if I were making a regular hem, then again fold the fabric back on itself so that we have that lip.
That's great.
Okay.
You know, we might give people a little hint because this is something that I think so often people will get bogged down in doing a blind hem. So if you'll bear with me here, if you're going to be trimming and you, of course, it's a good idea usually, particularly in the round, to cut out a little bit where you're going to start because of course your cutter is in front of where the needle will grab the fabric and sometimes it can shift that hem like this otherwise. So Amy, I just thought I wanted to add that because sometimes we get calls in our education department from people about that.
And it does help in the round. That's what I did on my cuffs. Okay, I'm going to lift my fabric up, or excuse me, my presser foot up.
And there's that extra lift. Yep.
And we'll begin serging. Now the fold of my fabric is going to follow this white guide right here. And as I'm serging, I'm going to be able to stop and check to see if that's the width that I need.
So in other words, we can adjust the foot so that the needle just barely catches the fold, right? And if it were catching too much, we would adjust the little roller, is that right, on the foot? And if it weren't catching at all, we'd adjust the little roller back the other way so that it would guide it perfectly and have it. Okay, so there's what it looks like from the wrong side, and a little like our casing and hem fold. But on the right side this time, we didn't catch nearly as much. You just barely caught it so that it is caught, but it isn't showing on the right side. It's all hemmed up. What a time saver. Isn't that great? Well, Amy, thanks so much for sharing with us today and teaching us so much about our new Huskylock. And thanks to you also. We've sewn most of the way through our new Huskylock Owner's Handbook. And I hope that you will find this just as easy as we have. Be sure to visit your Viking dealer for extra help and to attend Viking Club and Serger Club. And we'll say until next time, happy sewing.